Hello, my name is Ariel Myers, and I am the founder of Wisdom of the Womb. And I am really honored actually today to be able to share in the next hour basically as much as possible about your body, reproductive health in general, and specifically fertility. And I feel like this information is so important, and that's why I feel honored to share it, because it feels like this is something we should have learned. I used to say when we first got our very first period, but I actually feel like it's so important that all children should be learning about it, learning about the seed cycle, how it relates to nature as well as to our bodies, since we all come from this process. And from what I have gleaned in the past 20 years of doing this, is that women, and myself included, have been so poorly informed on this, of no fault of our own. So I feel like I have a lot to share here. I feel a little bit like time constrained, but I want to get it all in. And so for each of you, just trust that you will receive exactly what you are meant to receive in this next hour. Trust that you could always go back. If you feel like you haven't quite understood something or gotten something, you could definitely go back and watch again. I would recommend taking notes. You could watch it the first time just all the way through, see what kind of resonates, and then come back and watch it again. And I will go through things relatively quickly, but just know that I spend lots and lots of time talking about this. So if you do want to learn more, I do have a 12-week course where I really dive into each cycle, kind of spiraling through each cycle again and again, so that we kind of understand where we are in our cycle. And I guess that's where we should begin, is to recognize that our body is cyclical. In Western medicine, we often learn that there are two phases of our cycle. So there's the follicular phase, which is the first half of our cycle, which is when we're building our follicles. And then the second half, which is our luteal phase. But actually in Chinese medicine, we divide the phase into 4 phases. And so I'll go through each of these 4 phases. I'll go through it just an overview and then kind of quickly. So we have the blood phase, the yin phase, the qi phase, and the yang phase. And it's actually really important that we honor and recognize where our bodies are in the cycle, because very different energies are needed. Different food, different rest and sleep requirements are needed. Different emotions might come up. We all kind of are aware that we might get more PMSy in our yang phase. There's a reason for that, rather than it just being like, oh, it just happens. So that's one of the most important things, is kind of recognizing our bodies as cyclical. And I just want to invite you in this next hour, for however long you've been trying to get pregnant, wherever you are in your fertility journey, wherever you are in the process, if we can just in the next hour kind of just begin to explore if there's an opportunity here for us to really acknowledge our bodies as perfect. I think one of the main things that arises when we have been in our female body, is that these female bodies tend to be incredibly overly medicalized. These processes that happen that ought to be honored and celebrated and even revered as we create, as we bleed, they just tend to be either medicalized if there's an issue with it, if we have cramping, or if we have, whatever it is, irregular periods. Our bodies are just told that they are wrong and not performing properly. And at best, this is sad that it's at best, is that when we get our period, we're like, put a tampon in it and get on with your day, and hopefully it's something that you could ignore. I think it's very rare, and if you're one of those women that this has been your situation, I'm a little bit jealous of you and also really happy for you that, it's rare that a woman's first bleed or any bleed is honored and celebrated. So this fertility journey, I don't want it to be just another situation where you feel like there's something wrong with your body and it needs to be fixed. What if instead, at least just this next hour, we can explore the opportunity that maybe this is your body's way of showing you what the next step is, what an opportunity this is for you to really dive in and understand your body and understand yourself and really begin to trust your body's wisdom and trust that maybe there's actually nothing wrong. Maybe your body is actually responding appropriately to living in an environment, a situation, a culture, a system that is not really built for us, built for these female bodies. And I do believe these female bodies are different and valuable and special. And I also believe that the prevalence of autoimmune diseases and other issues in women is so much higher because we are kind of being expected to function on this much more linear time frame of existence of like produce at all costs rather than really honoring that we're cyclical. So today we are honoring each other as cyclical beings. I am in my luteal phase. So the luteal phase in me sees the luteal phase in you. You'll know why that's funny by the end of this talk. Okay, so let us begin. I took some notes because there is a lot to go through, and I want to make sure I don't forget anything. So the reason that it's so important to recognize where we are in our cycle is because during each phase of our cycle, there really are things that we can do or not do, as you'll see in the Yin Phase, that can help us to really optimize and support our fertility. Often, every time we bleed, if we've been trying to get pregnant for a while, we think like, oh no, another month has passed, it's another failure. But if instead we can recognize that actually, yes, each cycle we can actually improve our fertility. So I don't feel like age is like the end all be all. I do believe that we can, I don't like to use take charge because I don't like the idea of controlling our bodies. I think that's one of the reasons why we've gotten to this place of disconnection in the first place. But really optimize and support and be in relationship with our fertility. So we'll start with the first phase, which is the blood phase. So the blood phase is kind of the easiest to recognize because it is when we are bleeding. So it's typically, we consider day one, the first day we wake up bleeding. So if we start bleeding on, say, the evening of the 28th, then the 29th will be day one. And the blood phase is typically 3 to 7 days. It varies from woman to woman. Ideally, we want our blood to be red, not too clotty, not too thick, not too much spotting before or after. And we'll dive into this phase a little bit more as we kind of spiral through. I'm kind of spiraling through like we do, getting into our cyclical nature. But typically for like the average is 28 days. 25 to 32 tends to be okay. If we get shorter than 22 days, we're really not having enough time for everything that needs to happen. We need 11 days in order for ovulation to occur and 11 days for implantation to occur. So we'll talk about all of this. The next phase after the blood phase, so it starts whenever we stop bleeding and basically up until a few days before ovulation, and that is the Yin phase. And this is when our follicles are developing. One of those follicles that we are developing will become the kind of dominant follicle, or the queen bee, and that follicle is the one that will be ovulated. Now, pretty much the number one question that we get is what is yin? And I'll dive into this again a little bit more. But yin is basically the more feminine. I say feminine, but it doesn't mean female. We need yin and yang in everything. In everything to be alive, we need yin and we need yang. And so in Chinese medicine, the yin is considered the dark side of the mountain. Now on the same mountain is the side that the sun is shining on, would be the yang side. So the yang is tending to be more masculine, but again, that is energetic or yang energy. You've probably heard of like the yin yang. That's basically the two polarities. It's basically like two ends of the batteries that need to come together. They're mutually engendering. I like to see it as the polarities that come together so that spark of life or energy can occur. So when you bring two ends of the batteries together and you get electricity, that's that spark of life, of conception. So we need both yin and yang. They're equally important. I'm trying not to get too off on a tangent, but I could talk about that and I have talked about that a lot, that yin has been seriously undervalued in our society for the past 4,000 years. So yin tends to be more about our intuition, more about our bodies knowing. Yin is substance, so our body is the earth, as opposed to yang, which is like the sun, mental consciousness, logic, reason. So especially in our culture where we've gone so far into technology and kind of as a way to control the earth, and so our bodies, which are a part of the earth, I believe we've kind of lost touch and lost connection to our yin aspect. So certainly in our society where it's like productivity at all costs, that's a very yang energetic, as opposed to yin, which is more rest and quiet and again intuition. The next phase is the chi phase, and this tends to be another phase that we are aware of because it's, especially when we're trying to get pregnant, it's also known as the ovulatory phase. So for most women, it tends to be somewhere between days 12 and 16. And this is where we need that burst of energy for ovulation to occur. So chi is basically just the energy in anything. It's like air, basically, just moving through everything. So sometimes if you want to feel chi, you can rub your hands together and then kind of feel that ball of energy inside. That's chi, and it needs to move through all of us. And when you have clear, fast-moving chi, you get that burst of energy needed for ovulation to occur. And when we cycle through again, I'll talk a little bit about why that might not occur. And the next phase is the yang phase. So this is post-ovulation. This is when implantation needs to occur. This is when our maybe fertilized egg needs to travel through the entire length of the fallopian tube, hopefully not getting caught in the fallopian tube, and we'll talk about that as well. This is when we tend to have more progesterone in this yang phase as opposed to estrogen, which is more abundant in the yin phase. And what I love about each of these phases of our cycle is that when we look at it, we can really recognize that it is the same thing as within, so without, that is happening out in nature. So each phase has a relationship to a season. So the blood phase tends to be related to the fall or the autumn. It's related to the metal element and to our lung and our large intestine. So this phase, if you think what happens when we're bleeding, we are shedding. We are letting go that which no longer serves us, which we no longer need. So on a physical level, related to the lung and the large intestines, we're literally inhaling what inspires us and exhaling, letting go. It's also related to the large intestine, so literally letting go of the shit that no longer serves us. On an energetic level, when we think about how we feel in the fall, how do we feel in the autumn? I personally tend to feel more aware of time passing. I feel a little bit closer to my ancestors. I feel an awareness of like the veil thinning, whether if it just feels like that weather-wise or like an actual feeling of just, every religion has its kind of most holy days around that time. There tends to be an honoring of our ancestors at that time. And it's actually the most sacred time of our cycle. When we are bleeding, this would be the time when we would have been potentially meeting in red tents and really witnessing each other and really supporting each other's reproductive health. There are a lot of herbs that can help with easing painful menses. I should share that while cramping, while bleeding, and terrible PMS and painful periods tends to be common in our culture, it's actually not normal, and it's not an indication of health. We can and we're meant to have periods that are pain-free. And I know for some of us who have been struggling with our periods all of our lives, that might seem ridiculous to us. But especially if you have something like endometriosis or fibroids or adenomyosis, where there's literally an accumulation of blood building up. So in fibroids, we might have a stagnation of blood and it accumulates. In endometriosis, it literally is a buildup of blood and then it bursts out of the vessels of the uterus. There tends to be a lot of energy around our blood. So during that time, it's really important to look at what are we holding on to? What are we not letting go of? I love the study of epigenetics that has been proven now that we actually hold the trauma of our ancestors in our wombs. It used to be like woo woo, like, oh, you hold the trauma of your ancestors, like, yeah, right. And now it's like, no, it actually is proven. So a lot of women who have issues during their blood phase, issues when they bleed, either pain or lack of periods, there tends to be some energetic component in the womb. So definitely working with My Bitches Brew Tea during this time. Womb massage is incredibly important. We could do castor oil packs. There's a lot we can do to get our blood moving. I love moxa, especially if there's pain. That's like beautiful warming heat on our abdomen. But there's so much there, and I do think it's important, especially if we have painful periods, to not just try to make the pain go away, to remember that this is actually our body's expressing itself to us. This is our body asking us to listen, and that if we can go into the pain, kind of in to get through, there's usually so much information there and so much wisdom and so much that wants to be known by us, by our spirit, for our healing. And I think it's actually a beautiful opportunity to do that. So I really like to look at the blood phase as a time of remembrance and honoring, and also exploration. So I could just talk about each of these cycles, each of these phases of our cycle for like hours on end. So I'm really limiting myself here, but there's always more. So each cycle is an opportunity, and I would just say, if especially every menstrual period feels like a loss for you, to actually sit with that and to honor the loss, honor the letting go, and also explore if there's ways to feel like you could really honor and remember your divinity, that like you are bleeding, so you are in your creation years. That's an amazing time. So next is the Yin phase, and this is related to the water element or winter. So I often like to refer to this phase as our gestational phase. This is when our follicles are growing. We are just nurturing and nourishing our follicles. This is such an important time, and often the phase of the cycle where especially Western women are so depleted and so deficient in yin, because society doesn't really allow for us to like feel ripe and juicy and allow ourselves to be nurtured and nourished. Like if you think about the energy it takes for a follicle to ripen and get plump and juicy, like how many of us allow ourselves that energy of like being really nourished and like plump? Like we're mostly like, let's go and lose weight and walk faster and be productive. And so remember, like, as within, so without, and as without, so within. So if we are not letting ourselves rest, if we are not really taking the time to nurture and nourish ourselves and like honor our bodies and like receiving, how do we expect our follicles to? So I really, really want to focus on that energetic of receiving, because especially when we look at polarity, which I won't go into that much, even though I'm dying to keep talking about it. But polarity, when we think about we are the feminine, and yes, we are potentially not that in our lives. Like I tend to have a lot of yang energy in my life. I tend to be more yang energy. I'm an Aries, so I'm not like women need to be feminine. It's not that. I think that we have a spectrum, and if there's ability for fluctuation in that, that's beautiful. But I think because so many of us are deficient in this yin energy, and we are specifically here because we want to conceive, I think it's really important to look at that. And yes, there's different arenas in life. And if you were like, I want to go have a really successful business, I would maybe say go look into your yang energy a little bit more. And I've certainly done some work about like being my own husband in my business. But when it comes to conception, especially if there are issues with fertility, I believe it's really important to explore our yin, and so to explore our feminine. And so that has so much to do with receiving. We are literally, when it comes to conception, wanting to receive the energy of the other, of our partner, into our body. I'll just let you breathe into that. So how often in life do you feel receptive to just really like going with the flow? Again, yin has to do with the water element. So if we think about water, it fills its container. It is like free flowing. It's just moving. It's always moving, right? Even if there's stillness, it's filling up the entire container. And of course, there's different versions of water. There's like oceanic water. I love to think of our womb as just oceanic because it's fierce. There's river water. We do need, this is so hard because I'm trying to like not go into all of it, but like we need the yang riverbanks of the masculine to contain our rivers of energy. But so many of us, especially if we have not been raised with healthy boundaries, if we were not raised to honor and trust our bodies, which is our like yin substance is our body, if we were not raised with really intentional boundaries, and if we were not raised in safety so that we can like lean back into like trusting our safe environment, it can be really, really challenging to relax into yin, to relax into our bodies, to trust the universe, which is really what is required when it comes to yin receptivity. So there's no like blame if relaxing into yin is difficult for you. This is all just an opportunity to explore. Yin is really about surrender, like release, relax, like there's the river moving. So if you have a hard time trusting, we might tend to control everything. Like I used to go into situations before I was so magical enough, before I learned about all this. Trust me, I didn't wake up like this. I was raised in a very, very typical upper middle class, stick a tampon in, starve your body kind of household. So trusting my body was not a part of the equation. And I really, it took me having a really unhealthy period, very, very painful, very, very heavy, very irregular. I would go like 9 months without a period. The doctor put me on the birth control pill to regulate my period. And within 2 years of being on the pill, I had developed PCOS, because yes, you can develop PCOS from being on the pill. That's actually very common. I gained like 20 pounds. I started growing like facial hair. It was not a pleasant time in my life. I was in college. That was terrible. And luckily I was really, I was interested in nutrition because I wanted to like lose weight. But through the kind of nutrition arena, I found Chinese medicine. My senior year in college, I took a course on Chinese medicine, and it was like the heavens opened up. It was like, like it just made sense of like as within, so without. Like what happens when you boil water? It dries up, it evaporates. So if you have too much heat in your body, you will get dried out, right? And that tends to be what happens when we have high FSH. We don't have enough yin cooling. We have too much heat. So we have an overabundance of FSH. So anyway, I got sidetracked. But yeah, I used to try to kind of control every situation because I couldn't just trust. And if you think about the energy of control, it is contracted, right? Like if you're like trying to control how everything goes because you don't just trust the flow, you will be contracted. And if you are contracted, then every single cell in your body is contracted, including your follicles. So they might not get big and plump. I could talk a lot about dieting here. We want our follicles to be plump, but we are not allowing ourselves to be ripe and juicy and fluid. What does that mean? So there's so much I could talk about. As you can see, I'm really being aware of time because we have a lot to go through. I'll just sort of share one more thing. So we tend to either have not enough yin or too much yin when it comes to our fertility. And they are related. I won't go into how, but yin is like the fluid metabolism of our body. So either we have too much fluid and it's not circulating properly, and this can actually become an overabundance of like dampness. This often comes from digestive health. This can come from a poor microbiome where we're not processing our foods as well, we're not digesting as well, and so we might get almost like the stuff that we're supposed to get rid of through our digestion, we actually are holding on to some of that, and that could become dampness. And so when we have dampness, typically that burst of energy that needs to happen for ovulation to occur, it's almost like all of the functions in our body are moving through like a fog. So moving through like pea soup. So you might feel sluggish, you might actually gain weight, you might be a little bit heavier, you might feel lethargic, you might feel like everything takes longer, you might actually have slow digestion or loose stools. And so basically this is when we have too much yin. And when we really have too much yin, it can actually accumulate, like fluid accumulating, and become cysts or become the beginning of fibroids if it accumulates with some blood too. We can have cysts, fibroids. If we don't have enough yin or it's accumulated somewhere else, we can actually become dry. And so we're not having the moisture needed to nourish and support our follicles. We can get night sweats, we can get hot flashes. We don't have that estrogenic quality of yin. And this tends to happen naturally around perimenopause. I am 45, so I am feeling aware of this shift happening. And it definitely can be a natural process, but when we are trying to get pregnant, we need yin. So definitely finding ways to support your yin. My Fertile Mama Tea is amazing for nourishing yin. I also really encourage you to get into water because water is that energetic of yin. So like no technology, no cell phones in, you can listen to music. I have some guided meditations that you can work with. But really being in water and like relaxing into water can kind of give your body that safety of flowing in yin. Yoga, meditation can really support yin. And like I used to just like schedule a yoga class in, like I gotta go do yoga. Like that's not really the kind of yoga I mean. I mean like really let yourself be nourished and nurtured by like the softness of a yoga class. Like don't just like pack it into a full day. And really a good exploration during this phase is to look at how you allow yourself to be nurtured, nourished. Do you allow yourself rest? Do you feel guilt around rest? Do you feel shame around rest? How were you nurtured and nourished and fed as a child? And this tends to be the phase that I kind of really ramble on about because it is so important. And I recognize that especially when we're caught up in the fertility process and we're like trying to figure out what's wrong with us, it can be really easy to just overlook this phase of like really digging into it, of like exploring rest. Like that feels like, all right, I don't have time to rest. But I really look at this work and this phase, like all of my work is in deep devotion to the yin, which is why I kind of really get into it, because I do think it's missing in our society, it's missing in each of us, it's missing in relationships, and so I have a deep devotion to yin, like even in my work and even in my business, like really honoring the yin. So the chi phase tends to be the next phase of our cycle that we are aware of because it's when we are ovulating. And so many women are doing like LH predictor kits and looking at where they're ovulating. So we do tend to have a sense of if we are ovulating. Um, I will not go into it now, but I really, really recommend using BBD charting. I have BBT charting, basal body temperature charting. I have an entire video on my YouTube channel about how to do that. That I think is really the best way to really explore what's happening in your fertility, what's happening with your follicles, what's happening during each phase of your cycle, including your chi phase, to see how are you ovulating. You might know that you're ovulating, but your temperature might not be spiking enough, or you might be getting a really slow to rise LH surge, which is indicative of certain things that I'll share now. So usually ovulation happens around days 12 through 17. So this is when we would work on really kind of invigorating your chi more. So you could use my fertile moon tea. This is more energizing as opposed to yin, which is more about soothing and nurturing and resting. The chi phase has a lot to do with moving, right? I talked about that energy moving through everything, including our body. This phase is related to the wood element, which is related to the spring. So if you think about what happens, the slow winter where our follicles are kind of gestating, right? And then ovulation, it's like the first buds coming through the soil. So that's actually really good to eat during this time, is lots of leafy greens, things that innervate your liver. We really want to support our liver during this time because our liver is what controls the smooth flow of energy through our body. So especially if we have a stagnant liver, we might get poor ovulation or unsuccessful ovulation. We really need that burst of energy for ovulation to occur. And that's why I do recommend doing a detox. I have a detox tea that I recommend for an entire cycle before you begin with the other teas, or you can just do a cup of detox in addition with the other teas. But really supporting our liver, especially in this society where it's even as, healthy as we try to be, even our organic crops are being sprayed with, not sprayed directly, but being rained on and breathing in the glyphosate that's sprayed on much of the crops in the rest of our country. So it's really important to support our liver. We tend to be kind of inundated without even realizing we're being inundated with toxins and microplastics. And again, I could go on a little bit of a tangent about that, but I'm really trying to stay clear. So the wood element is about determination, tenacity, decision making, getting to where you need to go. And that's kind of how I see ovulation. It's like, this needs to happen. It's going to happen. We're going to do this thing. So if you tend to be someone who has a hard time making decisions, who doesn't have a lot of get up and go, who tends towards depression, who tends towards sluggishness, there are a few issues here. It could either be we don't have enough chi. That can be in our society, in our culture, that's not as common to be really chi deficient. But if you've had a lot of illnesses, if you tend to just like not have a lot of vitality in your life, if you were sick a lot as a kid, if you took a lot of antibiotics, if you had eating disorders, it is possible you don't have enough chi. You might have loose stool again, or poor digestion. In this case, if you don't have enough of that energy to get that chi moving, to have that burst of energy that ovulation needs to occur, then we really need to tonify your chi, boost your chi, encourage your chi. What tends to be more common in our society is for there to be stagnation of chi. This is when our chi gets stuck. And this can be from the stressful lives we lead, that there's lots of stress. They could be due to poor diet, poor food. I talk about this a lot in our 12-week course. But one of the best ways to promote chi moving is to support your liver. So the detox tea, the fertile moon tea, womb massage. I have a free tutorial in YouTube how to do that. It's really important to just get energy moving. Brisk movement, brisk exercise. You could do more brisk yoga at this time. This is the time that exercise is good. Some really brisk movement of energy supporting your liver. Again, leafy greens. Lemon water is great for your liver first thing in the morning. Fresh fruits, fresh vegetables. And I think I'm going to dive in here, take a little break before we move on to the yang phase, since I've been talking about it a little bit, and just go into a little bit what I call the four fundamentals of fertility. And so basically, this is like the fundamentals of health, fundamentals of longevity. Anybody who really works with health and aging knows that these four things really need to be in place and kind of buttoned up for us to have our overall optimized health. So the first is sleep. And we really need adequate sleep in order to have optimized fertility. So much happens when we sleep, kind of resetting our nervous system, promoting healing. I really, really encourage trying to get at least 8 hours of sleep. And that is 8 hours, even if you're not sleeping that whole time, where you are in bed in the dark without technology. If you can not put your phone in your room, if you could not have your screen be the first thing you check in the morning, if you're not scrolling right before bed. And I will admit this is challenging for me too. But I really, really recommend you doing whatever you can to encourage healthy sleep. I do recommend cutting out coffee. There's a lot of new research being done around how coffee and the caffeine in coffee specifically shuts off oxygen to the brain, that if you have a coffee at 7 a.m., it's still in your body at 7 p.m. I love coffee, but I recently cut it out. I'm still doing like a water decaf coffee, and it was brutal actually to detoxify from coffee, which kind of tells me how addicted to it I was and how much it was doing to my body. My sleep was not great for a while, I think, as I was kind of like adjusting to it, and now I'm having incredible sleep. I do recommend melatonin. If you have difficulty falling asleep, melatonin can be great. We also recommend like a cortisol supplement to help with sleep, especially if you're finding yourself being stressed, but really working with what you can around sleep and supporting your sleep is important, but really shutting off technology is like number one. The next is sun. So actually, I was a sunphobe, total sunphobe. This skin does not do well in the sun. So I really avoided sun, but now there's just so much information out that we really do best when we let some sun into our eyes, into our skin. Ideally, early morning sun, so like before 9 a.m., before 10 a.m., possibly, to go outside without sunscreen, without sunglasses on. We don't want to like look directly in the sun. I know some people are talking about that. But just being outside in the sun, early morning sun is not as like burning, but just to let your body absorb it. Vitamin D is best absorbed through the skin, and vitamin D is one of the most depleted supplements in women that are trying to get pregnant. I actually do have a list of supplements that are recommended for fertility specifically. It's also on our website. All of this information is on my website, by the way. But really being able to absorb vitamin D through the skin is really the best way to get it. Also letting that sun into your eyes impacts your melatonin and so your serotonin, and it could really just allow for a healthier, happier life and then better sleep. Speaking of sun, I'm trying to get myself out of the sun, so I'm keep shifting backwards. So body movement is the next fundamental of fertility and overall health. Moving our bodies is so important. And so we see a variety of women, some who have been mostly sedentary, and then a lot of women who have over-exercised so much of their life. And again, this is another topic I can talk about a lot, but really getting away from an overexertion, punishing type of exercise to, again, control our bodies. We're really trying to get away from that. And so for both varieties of women, all women, if this can be an opportunity to really begin again to see how we can be in relationship with our moving body, relationship to how our energy moves when we dance. There's, I think it's Martha Graham. Yeah, Martha Graham. She was a dance choreographer, a dance teacher. I believe that her students named her course the House of Pelvic Truth. And she would basically teach her students to dance from their vagina. So can you like close the window, close the curtains, maybe light some candles and practice moving from your vagina, moving from your womb. I think that is the best way to move. We should be moving through all of our life from our vagina. I'm chuckling, but I mean it. So really this time is not about like, yes, it's important to move our body, to move our chi, to boost our health, to get our immune system going. Yes to all those things, but also to really experience an opportunity to like feel into our body. Can we feel delicious and juicy and delightful? And I'm going to talk about that more into the Yang phase, because pleasure really should come into play in our fertility journey. But the last one is food. Food, so important for fertility. Of course, I'm an herbalist, so I do see food and plants and herbs as medicine. But also there's so much pleasure around food and community around food and relationships, like eating with family, having meals with loved ones. I don't believe that food should be so restrictive that we are not able to go out and socialize and have fun. I will say, though, that there are foods that do tend to be more inflammatory. And I talk about inflammation often, but inflammation and fertility, it's very hard for those things to coexist in one body. So inflammation is incredibly, incredibly important to look at when we are struggling with fertility. There are foods that tend to be less inflammatory and actually antioxidant and healing. I do have a food guide, again, on my website that you can look at. It's free. But even just Googling like anti-inflammatory, antioxidant foods, I do recommend a more paleo, like whole food. I think if that was like just what we did was remove food products from our diet and really focus on food, real food, eggs, butter, fish, fruits, vegetables, getting away from like all the food products like bars and packaged foods. We're again looking for that vitality, that energy. It's like an energy packet in a real food as opposed to a product where everything's kind of been depleted. So we really want to focus on our energy and really nourishing ourselves. Bone broth is amazing. Again, go to my food guide. I won't share everything here. But if you find that you do have a lot of inflammation, I definitely recommend really beginning to heal your microbiome. I think so many of us, because of the widespread use, again, of glyphosate, even if we're not eating gluten and dairy, I do recommend getting rid of gluten just because it's so sprayed with glyphosate. But it's really getting its way into like all of our crops and all of our soil. So really supporting your microbiome with a good probiotic is important. And again, the detox tea is great for just detoxifying your liver. Okay, the next phase in our cycle is the Yang phase, and this is post-ovulation. I typically say around day 17 through our next bleed. When we're trying to get pregnant, often women will call this the 2-week wait, which I don't love because waiting is like the worst thing, and there's so much else we can be doing during this phase. Yang tends to be that more light side of the mountain, so it has a lot more to do with masculine energy. It has a lot more to do with fast moving and actual heat, warming energy. So progesterone, which is more in abundance during this time and actually needed for implantation to occur, is warmth. Progesterone is much more warm than estrogen, which is much more cooling in yin. So we actually need that yang energy for the hopefully fertilized egg to travel the whole length of the fallopian tube and then burrow into our womb. So our yang energy is actually what allows for that trilaminal layer. We have 3 layers of our uterus. They all need to be there. We need to have a thick and juicy uterine lining for that to happen. So that has a lot to do with yin energy, but also what's happening during this yang phase of the cycle. Now on an energetic level, yang has to do with fire, the summer. There's that like exuberance of energy. This whole phase, this mother phase, the maiden, the mother, the empress, the crone, the mother phase is this yang phase where you are in full bloom, you are creating. That's this time that is related to summer, like when everything is abundant and in full bloom. We need this fire yang energy for that to happen. And often, especially when we've been trying to get pregnant and we're kind of feeling depleted and defeated, maybe, that energy that has so much to do with passion and pleasure and play and joy, like that is often not a part of our fertility journey. So this is kind of really me offering you permission and even encouragement to try to bring that back into your journey. And one of the ways to look at that is to explore what brings you joy. Our heart fire and our kidney fire, it's like our kidney hearth. Those are the two areas where we create fire in our body, and they literally connect and meet in the womb. And I have some meditations in the YouTube channel about connecting our heart fire and our kidney fire in our womb. That might actually be in the Fertile Mama Method course, but I know I have that somewhere, and that has a lot to do with childlike wonder and joy. Children are also yang energy. When you think about like the abundance and exuberance of a child, they're always moving, they're always going. That energy is like yang, yang, yang. So really think about like what brought you joy when you were young. What did you do just for fun? For no other reason than just to like be in pleasure. At this time, when you are already in your luteal phase, your yang phase, you've already either conceived or not. So there's kind of nothing else to do except to have pleasure. So I don't like to say 2-week wait. I used to say like 2 weeks of pleasure, 2 weeks of like finding passion. And the reality is I can talk about this a lot more, but often if we are not really exploring the areas in our life that make us feel the most alive and the most happy, often we're thinking that just like having a child will fill that for us. But as someone who has had children and knows a lot of women who have had children, that doesn't always get filled by our children. That can shift it for a while and focus our attention on it. And often until we get out of our early mothering years, we are distracted. But often that desire for us to really explore and find what makes us feel most alive will come back. So I encourage you to take these 2 weeks to do the things that you could do for no other reason than to just feel pleasure. For some women, it's dancing. For some women, it's painting, art, walks in nature, getting in touch with nature, moving your body, exploring your sexuality. At this phase of your cycle, if you're not pregnant, you're not going to get pregnant. So this is often the time of the cycle when women who are not trying to conceive, can explore their sexuality without fear of becoming pregnant. So this is a really powerful, powerful time. I can talk a lot about why PMS happens during this time, but I am aware of time. So I will just say that really continuing to move our energy is important during this time. Continuing to warm our bodies is incredibly important. A cold womb is actually, I don't love that term, but that's actually something that happens, especially if we're eating a lot of raw foods, if we're eating a lot of cold foods, if we're drinking a lot of like iced water. Our digestive organs are really close to our reproductive organs. And again, when we get cold, what do? We tighten up, we contract. And a egg is not going to want to burrow into a contracted uterus. So really doing what you can to warm and soften your womb. I have a womb warming tea, I have womb warming oils, especially if you know you have cold in the womb. This can cause recurrent miscarriages. Again, in my 12-week course, I talk a lot about miscarriage. I don't have a ton of time to go into that now, but we'll just say that warming, one of the simple ways to tell is to just put the back of your hand above your belly button and then below your belly button. And if it's colder below your belly button than it is above your belly button, then you probably have some cold in your womb, and warming will be really important. And I will just say that recently I've been kind of dividing the luteal phase into 2 phases, the yang phase into 2 phases, because there is this warming component that's really important. But for a lot of women, especially in this culture, when we have so much stress and so much stagnation, chi also tends to get stuck during this time. So my Bitches Brew Tea is really important for promoting that movement of chi and blood. So often we'll discuss like what would be best for you. But know that especially if you have cold in your womb, it's really important to kind of promote warmth during your luteal phase to keep your progesterone elevated. Again, the BBT charting is important so that you can see. I talk about it more in that video, but if your luteal phase temperatures aren't getting high enough, implantation just won't occur. Okay, so now really quickly, just because we have a couple more minutes, and I'm happy that I gave myself a few more minutes. I felt like I was like jam-packing that all in. Know that if any phase really resonated with you, if you felt like really called to learn more about any specific phase, I have some blogs about each phase on the website. I have a blog about the more physical, and then going deeper about more of the energetic. I also, in my 12-week course, really dive into all the juicy stuff and have meditations for each phase. And then I also have talks about each of the most common diagnoses when it comes to fertility. So unexplained infertility, endometriosis, and that kind of goes along with fibroids, PCOS, high FSH. Did I say unexplained infertility? I talk about all of that. So if you really want to learn more, there's definitely more available to you. So the next thing that feels very important when you're trying to get pregnant is to understand when you actually can get pregnant, when in your cycle you are most fertile or fertile at all. And a lot of women don't know this. And so if you are someone who is waiting until you ovulate in order to have sex, I will tell you that you are waiting too long. So a lot of people don't know that the egg only lives for 24 hours, 24 to 48 hours. I just say 24 hours, while sperm actually lives for 5 days. So that is a big difference. So I like to think of the egg as like Queen Diva. Like she is coming out of her of her follicle. She is, coming out onto the stage. I like to think of her as like a diva coming onto what is it called? An arena, coming out onto the concert hall, the stage. And she wants to be greeted by her audience. If she is coming onto the stage and it's an empty audience, or the audience members are just starting to trickle in, she's not going to be pleased. So we want to have a packed house of sperm for when the diva arrives. She is like greeted in her magnificence, as she should be, by all of these devoted sperm. So if you know that the sperm lives for 5 days, you can have 5 days worth of sperm waiting for the diva. It does take sperm some time to regenerate, and especially if your partner has any kind of sperm difficulty. I do have a male fertility bundle as well. We have some teas that promote better health sperm. But I do recommend waiting a day in between to kind of regenerate healthy sperm. So this will be based on your cycle, which again, it's important to do BBT charting. But so I'm just going to say, like, let's assume that you ovulate on day 15. Okay. So if you're ovulating on day 15, say you bleed from days 1 through 5. Okay. So basically you're going to first have sex. I mean, feel free to have sex any other time, but this is when you should have sex if you are really trying to get pregnant. So the day after you stop bleeding, so in this case, if you bleed from days 1 through 5, you would have sex on day 6, and then you'd have sex every other day up until you ovulate. So day 6, day 8, day 10, day 12. Then if you know that you ovulate or tend to ovulate on day 15, you'll have sex 3 consecutive days around the day that you ovulate. So in this case, you'll have sex 14, 15, and 16. Then you'll skip a day, have sex the following day. So in this case, it would be, oh my God, numbers. Wait, what did I say? 14, 15, 16. It'd be 18, So just in case for any reason you ovulate late that cycle, and then any sex after that is optional. So the reason that we have sex starting pretty early is in case we happen to ovulate early that cycle. And also to make sure that you have basically 5 days worth of sperm greeting your egg. Okay, so that was a lot. Hopefully you feel like you absorbed and received what was meant for you to hear, to receive during this past hour. You can feel free to come back and watch this at any time, take notes. We have a ton of resources on our website, blogs, supplement lists, food guides, of course, all of our teas, womb massage tutorials. I didn't even talk about yoni steaming and fertility womb massage and the bath soaks. But just know that there are tons of ways for you to connect with and get in touch with your body. And if you can see this as a way that you can begin to be in like loving, devotional relationship to your body. I think so many women come into their fertility journey with a lot of fear, a lot of shame, a lot of resentment for and anger at their body for not like working right, for feeling like there's something wrong. And again, if I can just remind you one more time, it won't really be one more time, I'll do it over and over and over again, that your body is in like devotional service to you all the time. Like I'm getting a little teary-eyed talking about it, but our bodies are here for us to really be our guide and our temple. And I think we tend to ignore our body's messages. We are taught, unfortunately, to ignore our body's messages all of our life. And if that can change with this fertility journey, then that will be a huge success, right? If we just begin to listen, begin to honor, begin to really be in relationship with our body and our body signals and our body's messages. And I have a lot more guidance and offerings to help you do that. But congratulations, really, on this first step of your journey. And I would be honored to be here for you for more of it. And that was my dog just snorting. But really, we are here for you. We are in service to the wisdom of the womb. Like, that's why I'm doing this. I feel like this was a gift to me, and I feel really honored to share it with you. So, to help our head and our heart and our womb connect and let that be what guides us. I think so much of us learn only to trust our minds, and I think our minds are important, right? Like we're smart, we do our research, we explore what is right for us, and we know a lot, but I think just leading with our minds will only get us so far. And when it comes to really this creating life thing, I think our heart and our wombs have to play just as important a role. So we can like explore all the supplements to take and do everything right, and it's sometimes not enough. So really connecting with our heart and our wombs, and mostly just beginning to trust yourself. Like I trust you to do what's right for you on this journey. I would never want to be the expert of your body. Like, you are the expert of your body, and if I could guide you through and help you take some steps that feel meaningful and feel right and feel supportive, I would love to do that. So thank you so much for spending this last hour with me. It was truly a pleasure. Luckily, the sun is out of my face, and we're here for you. We're here if you have more questions. We're here if you have concerns. If you just want to check in, we are here for it. So thank you so much, and I'll see you soon.